Welcome everyone. This is Thoughtful Thursdays by Tornado IP. I'm the founder of Tornado IP and I'm here today with Andy Kannurpatti. And Andy is a longtime friend and former colleague from DuPont. And I wanted to invite him to bring his perspective and especially his perspective on how he's worked in DuPont across various different functions across the supply chain, from technical development to business leadership to commercialization, and now most recently AI strategy. And he has led in industries including advanced materials, electronics, manufacturing, printing, and sustainability. And he's now focused on helping organizations move beyond AI buzzwords toward real business impact. So that's, I was really looking forward to this conversation because AI is not just changing tools. It's changing how companies are making decisions, how they innovate, how they scale, and how they think about protecting what matters. So today we're going to talk about AI implementation, innovation, and intellectual property, not just in theory, but in practice. So Andy, welcome, and I'm really glad that you're here. Is there anything else that you would like to add to your professional background?
No, I think you covered, Sylvia. The thing I would say is all my career, and I've been at this now almost 30 years. I've spent time doing things that were about building and transforming. So almost every role I took, even at DuPont, didn't exist in that form until I got it. And usually I left those roles also when there was a change, transformation that was happening, where either the business grew and we had to split it into two or do things like that. So for me, transforming and changing and building is what I thrive in. Today, AI is a critical part of that, and people should be in business, should be thinking about how to utilize what AI can offer, but also should be thinking the other way around, as in rethinking their business based on what AI has to offer as well. So I think that's the fun part. And today I do a lot of consulting on that and helping companies transform themselves with AI.
No, yeah, that's. I think we have that in common: creating new roles and new functions when that's needed, and enjoying change. Because I do think that not everybody enjoys change, and I think
That's right.
if people have been following my conversations, I think it's pretty clear. People in some functions, it's just they're change adverse, and sometimes it takes for someone like me and Andy to come in to even explain what are the changes that are possible. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. So coming from R&D through commercial leadership and now into AI strategy, what you're seeing from your seat when companies talk about implementing AI, what, in your opinion, separates the organizations that are truly creating business value from those that are just running pilots?
Well, I think it's at the core trying to understand all the different processes that are going on in your business and what makes your business tick first and foremost. If businesses start there, what I find is then when they look at how they will utilize AI or how they will transform their workflow processes, whether that's an innovation process or whether that's a supply chain process or whether that's a financial reporting process, it doesn't matter what process it is, then they start to actually see value in it. And they actually can build a coherent roadmap as to how to implement that and be strategic about it. Choose the areas where they actually will make a difference. Start there. And then that's no longer a pilot at that point, because at that point, you're learning by doing things appropriately and you're building a coherent approach to implementing AI. So those companies that are actually starting there are doing well. Now, remember, I am talking in the context of companies that already have full-fledged businesses and have been growing or developed businesses. There's a whole category of businesses that are being formulated today that didn't exist before because now they're AI first and they can actually transform and shake the very business model that's available in certain industries. And that's also going on at the same time. But I'm talking in the context of, think of some of the businesses that you and I were associated with in companies like DuPont or NatureWorks or other places, right? So you actually can rethink how you're doing things, and those are the ones that are being successful.
Yeah, so that's what I think most of my audience is today. So in your opinion, if you're thinking about manufacturing, materials, electronics, and sustainability
Yep.
businesses, where do you see AI having the most immediate impact on innovation? Is it in the discovery stage, development, scale up, customer support, commercial? In what you're seeing?
I think it's interesting you list them, but they're all places where people can start. But where I think it'll make a big difference to any company is what they look at as their biggest strategic lever. If the company is focused on product innovation as a way to succeed, what you will naturally see is that they'll gravitate towards trying to utilize AI more efficiently and effectively. So think pharmaceuticals, think agriculture businesses where there's a lot of perhaps combinatorial work, or biotech work where there's a lot of experimentation needed. AI can really help in some of those places. And I think it's formulation work that many would be familiar with. So if they're naturally inclined to being a product innovation company, they're going to try and strengthen that. This is not unlike, there was a book a long time ago about how to manage people, and it talked about, it's actually by Gallup, I think. It talked about how you need to focus on your strengths, right? And then you need to drive that, which means if your strength is product innovation, try to apply and provide support to product innovation with the latest capabilities of AI. You're going to do much better. Now, that doesn't mean you don't focus on improving efficiencies in your manufacturing or supply chain or customer experience processes that you have in your business. But that's the way I think about it. So if you're in an industry that is service oriented, customer experience is critical. People who apply things there are going to see that they can differentiate themselves from others much better. So you've got to still start with what is your core business, what is your core business strategy, and then you have to apply AI appropriately is my belief. And I think that works. Now, you can also take a step back and rethink whether you can enhance something that you've had a gap in, because now AI can jump in at perhaps a lower cost point than you used to be able to do certain things. So let's say you were very good at product innovation, you were fabulous at getting to customers and doing applications work with customers and so on, but then you struggled a bit in terms of being able to manage your supply chain or doing other things. I think investing there with the latest capabilities and technology to actually drive supply chain improvements and innovate in the way you actually manage your supply chain can also help a company. So it all depends on where you are. You can use it to add muscle to what you're already good at so that you do it much better than others and what's necessary in your industry. Or you can actually also look at improving efficiency somewhere other places. My view is, as long as you have a focused effort and a strategy about how you're going about it, and you're going about it systematically, chances are that the companies will succeed. And the fact that you're actually doing it already compared to some of the others in your industry that are not even thinking about it is going to be very important. I mean, it's not that people aren't thinking about it. I think people are a little bit more stumped by where to begin. And so if you can get a little ahead of that with a strategic approach, I mean, that's basically what happens when we at Strategem AI talk to our clients. Many of them start to say, yeah, we know we need to do this, but we're struggling with where to begin. Or we've done this sort of chat GPT thing, but we know we can do more with this, but we need to talk to somebody who's got experience, and we have to discuss some of the use cases that we have. So people are still in that part of the journey, many of them, and those who actually can start doing some things about it, building a strategy, they're the ones that are going to come ahead.
As AI helps teams move faster and generate more ideas in the innovation space, how should companies rethink what they patent, what they keep a trade secret, and how they should treat their confidential information?
I mean, so this is a massive area, right? I mean, it's an area of concern for a lot of people, because knowledge is the most important currency we've always had. I mean, anybody who worked in IP knows that, but especially folks like you. But when you start thinking about AI tools and the ability for models to refine themselves based on the types of information that they get access to. So there's a lot of questions around guardrails and security of your information and IP and protection and so on. There's a lot of tools already out there, and there's a lot of clear demarcations about what a model could be trained on. If you're an enterprise and you're using a large language model, how that could be used and so on. Now, having said that, what I'll say is the rules around the way you think about protecting your IP and what you follow as a company will depend upon overall strategy, right? So you have to still think about the same types of things, Sylvia, that you used to talk about with companies around when do you trade secret something and when do you actually go file for a patent. I don't think that changes a whole lot. You still have to think through that based upon what is core to the way you're going to go to market and so on. The extra layer of protection that you want to have is the protection in terms of how employees, how people in your organization, and how systems in your organization interact with AI, large language models, AI agents, things like that. Okay, so the question now becomes, it's not just an IT responsibility in some ways, it is also people really understanding how to use AI so that they are being careful about what they're going to use where. I mean, it's the temptation. For example, back in the day, you were all advised in many enterprises, right, to not just go on Google and do patent searches from your computer. Well, people are tracking where you're going, and people are, there were cookies. They wanted it. This may give others potential insight into types of things that your company is looking for. So they said, use certain specific tools, go through certain specific enterprise tools that we've invested in. If you're doing prior art searches, things like that. Those are good guardrails that were being put in those days, where it was just about searching and doing those kinds of things. Today, you can have an agent do that. Today, you can go in AI mode on Google and have it go search and do a prior art search even for you. You can use a notebook LLM to do that stuff if you have a Gmail account, right? How do companies safeguard against that? And that's an important piece, because the question is, when you do searches there, does that expose, especially if you're using a personal account, right? If you're using sylvia@gmail.com to do the search, and that's not what you want to be exposed somewhere. You don't have an enterprise license. You don't have some safeguards in place where, Google or whichever entity that you're using is going to protect your information, your data, your questions, your dialogue. Or if you haven't got the right settings in place even. I mean, sometimes it's just a very simple thing is, can we use your conversations to improve our language model is a little toggle, right, that you may or may not be aware of. Many people are not aware of it. And so those kinds of things are guardrails that are very important. So how they use these things is a baseline importance, number one, right? And then you start to think about, okay, so now that's there. Your trade secret, which may have been just a list of customers before, or it might have been recipes in your manufacturing. Your trade secret is also the thought process that you're having with your agents and your language models, in my view. Okay, so how do you protect that? You got to protect that based on having these kinds of training for your employees, ensuring that the tools that you're using are protected, there are guardrails, and you're using it from reputed places to be able to do it, right? Now, this technology is evolving extremely fast. So it requires organizations to be on top of it. Now, if you don't use it, you're going to be left behind. Because today, and I'll give you an example, right? You can go to Claude or something and build a device to do translation. And you would think that requires a lot of knowledge and capability. And the truth is it does. But you now have a lot of this in the public domain that allows you to at least build a prototype of something, right? Which means in the patent world, you can easily reduce something to practice. So the question is, how is that going to evolve? So what I don't know yet is, if somebody says something is novel and they go to patent today, what is the burden of proof on novelty there? What is the, how do patent offices now deal with this, where somebody else could have built it already as a prototype because they thought about something and it's out there? And what records do you need to keep for that? So let's say I'm coming up with a gizmo and it doesn't exist before. The truth of it is it probably exists in all kinds of forms already. But I'll give you this example that I was thinking of, right? I was watching, for whatever reason, I had some problems with my cable. I was only watching soccer on Telemundo because I didn't get the actual English channel to work. So I was watching it because, I wanted to watch soccer, right? I wanted to watch football, I should say. And the idea occurred to me, hey, look, if I can plug the audio from my TV into some device, and then take that feed in, I could get an AI agent to translate that live into English, and I could listen to it. And I actually did go through with the idea of asking Claude to design that for me. And I've got the design. And now, gladly, I was able to fix my cable and I could watch it in English without doing all this stuff. But you can easily come up with solutions today when you have a problem, is my point. And so patenting is going to become an interesting endeavor, and the burden of proving that it's novel is going to become difficult Or even if it's not, let's say the patent office approves a patent for somebody who's got this gizmo, but then they start to sue me because I make these things and start sending it out. Now, if I can show that I used an LLM and I have the date and records and everything and prove that I had it and I'm already making it here, how does that play? Now, this is a thing for patent lawyers, of course. But my point is, there's this sequencing issue that people are going to find difficult. We talk about priority dates and things like that. I don't know how it's going to play out. This is a very interesting area.
Interesting. Prior art search is going to have to expand to involve some of these large language models.
Well, and then if you start thinking about perhaps hallucinations and things like that, which let's also face it, right? Innovation starts sometimes with hallucinations. I'm gonna be a little bit out there saying this because you have to dream things up to be able to invent stuff.
Really, really interesting. So I always think of AI in two buckets. One is your input. Like you have to come up with something and yes, you must be careful about what you're going to put in there. Like you don't want to put trade secret information in there. You want to make sure that it doesn't share it the whole world. That's one part. But then the other part is what are you actually searching in? And you're already starting to see some things about where, the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, they certainly don't want their content that they're paying their journalists to write to be searchable. And, bringing us back a little bit to a big company setup where you have a company that's been around for 50, 100, 200 years and there's a lot of information there. And that information is not always in a nice format that's easy to search because people have bad handwriting and they didn't put it in a library nicely indexed or anything. They never spend enough money to do that. So in your experience, if you do see this, what do companies underestimate this kind of a data readiness, internal knowledge flows, and in this AI deployment?
I mean, look, I think data is super critical, especially if you're trying to leverage your existing knowledge base. So I think it's super important. Now, I think fortunately, at least some of the more recent advances in large enterprises, especially I'm talking in the context of R&D and innovation, since I know it's close to your heart. There's all these electronic notebooks and things like that have come about. So people that have adopted that have a little bit more of an advantage, I would say. And it's not as difficult for them to take their information and put it in. A lot of people have files in SharePoint, or they have, believe it or not, Lotus Notes databases. If you remember that, we used to have those as well. So I'm sure there's all these interesting repositories of data that people have. And what's happening today is there's two schools of thought. One is that says create a big data warehouse and dump it all in and then organize it, and then you do this big data warehouse project and then figure it out. And then there's the other view that says let's just get the data lake sort of created for what you really need for the kind of agent that you're trying to build, AI tool that you're trying to deploy, and then build it as you go along, and then eventually you can come up with a broader setup. I tend to be the person that thinks on the latter approach, being better. Because if you start saying, I'm going to just stop everything in terms of what I can deploy, but let me first work on a big data warehouse project, I think it's an inefficient way of doing things. Now, there are companies that have points of view that say one is better than the other, and for them that may be the right approach. But when I advise companies, I say, get started. Get started with what you think you need. So you don't have to, you're right, there are probably going to be all sorts of handwritten notes and things like that. But why don't we start with what you have that's digitized somewhere? Then let's talk about what else is out there that we can add. And can you figure out how to scan some of that? There's all kinds of OCR stuff, technology that's available today. Can you figure those kinds of things out down the road? But let's start with what you already have that's digitized. Maybe that's not in the same place, but let's create a way of tapping into different sources to be able to get that from OneDrives or whatever you have, right? So I think that's the right approach for companies, but it is a big issue. It doesn't matter whether it's an R&D innovation. It doesn't matter whether it's in the commercial angle. The product bulletins, right? You're trying to help customers figure out how to choose a product, how to actually use a product. Salespeople, customer service people, all these folks struggle with that stuff. Putting it all in to use AI term, the terminology, you basically want RAG, right? Retrieval augmented generation. So you basically, you want a RAG pipeline to feed these things. And there's lots of development going on already in that. you can actually see all kinds of things, even beyond RAG that people are, there's agentic RAG they talk about and so on. So there's a lot of good advances going on, and I think it can be done, and even a big enterprise can start small and make it bigger as they go down the road. And so I think it all starts with, where do you want to start solving your problems? What are things that are going to create value for you? And truly, it all comes down to, is there going to be a return on investment? Am I going to get the bang for the buck that I have here? Right?
Makes
I'm going to
sense. And
spend a lot of
also
money.
bringing
That's
this
what it
back
is.
to also security, Andy, how, you really also need to make sure that you know what information needs to stay internal to the company.
Exactly.
And whenever you're
Exactly.
deploying these systems, you can trust the deployment that it's going to keep it that way.
Often that's not a big issue today, because especially if you're using things like RAG, right? That's data that remains in your systems, in your cloud, deployments, and you've got your cybersecurity for that. You've got all of that is known, and you're already doing it. Most people's data is in OneDrive or in Salesforce and places like that. So you're already in the cloud. So it's not that we're asking people to change that. The question is, what does a large language model have access to, and what are you agreeing to when you set up an agent that has to use the large language model and tap into your knowledge base to do an action? That's all an agent does. All an agent does is uses the large language model as a way to function, but at the same time is using your knowledge base to draw conclusions from, and then is asking you, what is it that you want me to do? Okay, I'm going to go do that for you now, right? So that's really what an agent is doing in a nutshell. And so if your data is protected there, and if you understand what the guardrails are in terms of how the language model accesses the data and uses the data, and then you also have the guardrails on what questions employees can ask, or whoever the user is can ask, right? If you don't want the user to know, for example, we always talk about firewalls, right? Especially in the context of innovation or customer support, right? You don't want customer A's information going to customer B. So people who have access to the same agent who work at customer A shouldn't be able to tap into information that's available from customer B. So you've got to do those kinds of firewalling. And you can do that, and you can put guardrails even in the way the agents operate based on who is asking the question. But you may want the leadership team or somebody to have access to A and B, right? So that's the way you can set these things up. There's technology out there. There's companies, existing companies that do it, companies that are being built every day to figure out how to do it more elegantly. All of that stuff is going on in this space. That's the fun part about being in the Bay Area, by the way. You see all of this stuff going on every single day.
Andy, one last question for you, coming back to organizational culture. You've seen technical, business, marketing teams. What does strong leadership look like when they're introducing AI to an organization? And especially because everybody has different feelings about how secure information should be. Everybody has different feelings about wanting change. So, from that perspective, what does really good leadership look like?
I think, first of all, I think there needs to be a lot of engagement from leadership. Good leadership means you're engaging. You're doing things as well as asking people to do certain things, right? Believe it or not, I actually think the way companies implemented things like Six Sigma are what you got to think about, okay? When it comes to how leadership needs to do the change transformation when it comes to AI. You want the CEO to actually actively be engaging in some AI pilot, okay? And almost taking 100% sponsorship for that and driving that. That allows people to understand that this is actually something that is necessary. Again, this is if the company decides that they want to use AI to transform the way they do their business. Some are not there yet. They're still thinking about it. I think that's not a good thing. So I'll give you an example of a CEO that I'm working with right now. Okay, they've actually gone through and mapped all of their workflow processes. And I'm talking about almost 300 workflow processes that they've mapped in their business. It's a pretty large business. And those all ladder up to like 8 to 10 processes that you can think of company-wide, like high-level processes, but they're all sub-processes that happen, right? And this person is driving change by creating a clear vision of how they're going to start going down this journey, and where they're going to say, okay, these are some things we want to pilot and do right away. And they're picking a project that they say this is one I want to see and I want to lead and I want to drive it. And by the way, can we do that first or one of the early projects so that I can show the employees and show the team that I see value in it and they'll see value in it. And they're picking something that's valuable. And they're picking something that actually engages everybody in the organization, okay? So that it's something that they will all be, it'll all be tangible to them. So it's not just saying I'm buying Copilot for everybody, okay? I'm buying Claude for everybody. No, that's not what it is. It's actually looking at what's going to make a difference in the way we run our factories every day. And will it help the shop floor? Can we look at something that actually touches everyone somehow and do a pilot based on that? And then let's go from there. And then let's start to create the change. I think leadership requires that level of engagement and planning in this particular change.
Thanks, Andy. It's been really fun to hear your thoughts. I hope that we can get together and continue this conversation.
Sure, we can, yeah.
Yeah, and continue talk about different perspectives. So thank you everyone for joining us, and subscribe to Tornado IP's Thoughtful Thursdays to listen to other conversations. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia.